Have you ever woken up hours before your alarm, not because you were rested, but because your mind refused to let you sleep? No loud noise, no bad dream, just thoughts. Bills you haven't paid, messages you haven't opened, things you've been pretending not to worry about. I used to think mornings like this meant I was weak, that maybe I just wasn't handling adulthood very well. But I was wrong, because what kept me awake wasn't fear. It was survival. That morning, I looked in the mirror and realized something strange. I couldn't remember the last time I thought about where I'd be 5 years from now. Not because I didn't care, because I didn't have the space. Every thought was already occupied by today. And when today keeps demanding everything you have, tomorrow slowly disappears, without you even noticing. People often say, you should think long term. Invest, save, plan ahead, as if it's simply a decision. But no one ever asks a different question. What happens when every single day demands every ounce of your attention? How do you plan for next year when you're still trying to survive this week? I remember standing in a supermarket, holding 2 bottles of cooking oil. One cost just a little more, the other was cheaper. I stood there doing math in my head over a difference so small, most people wouldn't even notice it. That's when something hit me. When money is tight, even tiny decisions become exhausting. Not because they're difficult, because there are hundreds of them every single week. That night, I wasn't thinking about becoming rich. I wasn't dreaming about expensive cars or bigger houses. I was asking myself something much simpler. When was the last time I actually believed I had a future worth planning for? Because somewhere between the bills, the responsibilities, the unexpected expenses, and the constant pressure to survive, I had quietly stopped imagining tomorrow. And maybe that's the greatest cost of living paycheck to paycheck. Not the money you lose, but the future you slowly stop believing in. And once I realized that, I couldn't stop asking one question. Who or what had stolen it? That night, I sat there much longer than I planned to. The room hadn't changed, the bills hadn't disappeared, nothing about my bank account looked different. But something inside me had started asking a question I had avoided for years. What if the biggest thing poverty takes from you isn't your money? What if it's your imagination? Because I remember being younger, dreaming years ahead, planning businesses, imagining different cities, thinking about the person I wanted to become. Somewhere along the way, those dreams quietly became grocery lists, due dates, and unpaid bills. I didn't stop dreaming because I stopped caring. I stopped dreaming because survival became louder than possibility. Looking back, that's the cruelest part. Poverty doesn't always announce itself with an empty wallet. Sometimes it quietly convinces you that tomorrow isn't worth thinking about. And once that happens, you don't just lose money. You slowly lose your relationship with the future. The next morning, I decided something had to change. No more excuses, no more waiting. I opened my notebook, made a budget, and for the first time in months, I could actually see a future forming on paper. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. For a few minutes, I honestly believed I'd finally figured it out. Then my phone buzzed. One message. One problem. One expense I hadn't planned for. And just like that, the future I'd been building started shrinking again. Have you noticed how life rarely asks whether this is a good time? People think poverty is expensive because things cost money. I don't think that's the hardest part. The hardest part is how often your plans get interrupted. Every unexpected bill doesn't just take your money. It steals your momentum. It tells your future, not this month. Again and again and again. On the ride home, I looked around the bus. Everyone looked exhausted. Some were scrolling through their phones. Some had fallen asleep sitting up. Some stared out the window, the same way I was. And I couldn't stop wondering, how many of us weren't lazy, weren't irresponsible, weren't failing. We were simply too busy surviving to imagine anything beyond next Friday. That night, I closed my notebook, not because I had given up, because I was tired. Tired of starting over. Tired of rebuilding the same plan every single month. Then one thought quietly entered my mind. Maybe the biggest difference between people who plan for the future and people who don't isn't intelligence. Maybe it's something else entirely. And if that's true, what is it? That question changed everything. I used to blame myself. I thought maybe I just wasn't disciplined enough. Maybe I wasn't working hard enough. Maybe everyone else had figured out something I hadn't. But the more I looked at my own life, the more I realized something. It's incredibly difficult to think about 5 years from now, when today keeps demanding everything you have. When every month begins with hope and ends with another unexpected expense, your mind slowly learns not to dream too far ahead. Not because you've become lazy, but because survival has a way of shrinking your world. It convinces you that next week is more important than next year. And if that continues long enough, you stop asking, what kind of life do I want to build? You start asking, how do I just make it through this month? Looking back, that wasn't a money problem. It was a mindset created by constant pressure. And I didn't even realize it was happening. The next morning, nothing looked different. The buses still ran, the traffic still moved, people still hurried to work. Life carried on, as if yesterday had never happened. And maybe that's what makes this cycle so dangerous. It doesn't arrive like a disaster. It quietly becomes normal. I noticed something about myself. Every decision, no matter how small, started with the same question. Can I afford it? Not, is this the best choice? Not, will this help me later? Just, can I survive today? And the more I lived like that, the smaller my world became. One afternoon, I realized something that honestly scared me. I couldn't remember the last time I'd made a decision because I was excited. Almost every decision was about avoiding another problem, avoiding another bill, another fee, another setback. Somewhere, hope had quietly been replaced by damage control. That weekend, I had dinner with my family. We laughed, shared stories, talked about ordinary things. For a little while, I forgot about money. And then, on the drive home, the worries returned, almost instantly. That's when I realized, financial pressure doesn't always stay in your wallet. Sometimes it follows you into moments that were supposed to bring you peace. That evening, everything finally started making sense. Maybe the reason I couldn't think long-term wasn't because I lacked discipline. Maybe my mind had been doing exactly what it was designed to do. Protect me. Keep me alive. Focus on today's problems. Ignore tomorrow's possibilities. If that's true, then escaping this cycle isn't just about earning more money. It's about learning how to reclaim the future, one decision at a time. For years, I thought survival meant strength. I was proud that I could always figure things out, find another solution, stretch another paycheck, make another sacrifice. But survival isn't supposed to become your permanent lifestyle. It's supposed to be temporary. The problem is, when you live in survival mode long enough, it begins to feel like your personality. You stop introducing yourself as someone with dreams. You become someone who's just trying to get by. And that's heartbreaking, because buried underneath all that pressure, the person who once imagined a different future is still there, waiting. Not for permission, not for luck, just for enough breathing room to dream again. The following weekend, I opened the same notebook, the one I'd closed so many times before. Only this time, I made myself one promise. I wasn't going to change my whole life. I was only going to change one decision. Because maybe the future isn't built through giant moments. Maybe it's built through ordinary Saturdays, when nobody is watching. It wasn't a lot of money. Honestly, it almost felt too small to matter. Months earlier, I probably would have spent it without thinking. But that morning, something felt different. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't paying for yesterday. I was investing in tomorrow. And somehow, that tiny amount felt bigger than numbers could explain. As I walked home that afternoon, I noticed something strange. The neighborhood hadn't changed. The roads were the same, the shops were the same, the people were the same. The only thing that had changed was the way I looked at tomorrow. Hope doesn't always arrive like fireworks. Sometimes it quietly returns the moment you believe your future is worth preparing for again. If you're watching this, and you've stopped thinking about next year, I understand. I've been there. I know what it feels like when today keeps asking for everything you've got. But don't let today convince you that tomorrow doesn't deserve your attention. Even if all you can save today is a little money, a little energy, or a little hope, start there. Because every future is built, one ordinary decision at a time. If there's one thing this journey taught me, it's this. Being poor didn't stop me from dreaming. Living in survival mode did. The moment I stopped believing my future mattered, I stopped building it. And the moment I started making even the smallest decisions with tomorrow in mind, I wasn't just saving money. I was rebuilding trust in myself. You don't have to change your entire life overnight. You just have to refuse the lie that your future isn't worth planning for. One choice, one habit, one step. That's how tomorrow begins. Looking back, I don't think the biggest victory was saving money. It was believing that I was someone worth investing in again. For a long time, I treated my future like a luxury, something I'd think about after life became easier. But life rarely becomes easier on its own. It becomes different because of the choices we make while it's still difficult. Maybe that's where hope really begins. Not when everything is finally okay, but when you decide your future deserves a place at today's table. And maybe that's all long-term thinking really is. A quiet promise from the person you are today to the person you're still becoming. Thank you for spending these moments with me. If this story helped you see your own life a little differently, then maybe we've both taken one small step toward a better future. Keep asking better questions. Protect your peace. Protect your future. I'm Ledge Rhythm, and I'll see you in the next one.